And when you're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Down From Above. My name is Natalie and we have a long episode for you today. My guest is Eugene Braxton. When Eugene was just 15 years old, he died by drowning in a lake and he experienced an incredible NDE. And during this, he was able to explore the different levels of the afterlife. He was contacted by beings that healed him and gave him a download. He also found himself in a place that he described as a life review room. So we talk about this extensively, and we also get into some other stuff because Eugene is an expert in out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, and astral travel. He gives us a step-by-step on what to do if we want to practice having a lucid dream or an out-of-body experience, which I will probably try to do, and I will let you know how that turns out. Again, this episode is a long one, so let's not waste one more second. Here is my conversation with Eugene Braxton. So let's welcome to the show, Mr. Eugene Braxton. Welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you on. I've been really looking forward to this conversation with you for a couple months now, and I've been watching your videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thanks, Natalie. I'm glad to be here and thanks for having me on your show.
So Eugene, we have a lot to get into today, but of course, before I want to talk about your book called American Mystic Solves Near-Death Riddle. Now, before we get into your near-death experience, because I definitely want to dive into that first, may I ask you why you chose the word riddle in your book title?
Yeah, because then this was like 96, 97. It was kind of like an enigma. And I worked with some scientists, some three world authorities, and they described it as indescribable. And I felt that it was just not fully remembered. So to them, it was a middle. They didn't have any idea if it had a certain order. They weren't sure if it had stages or if it did, what stages went where. And there's a lot of reasons that they would have to not solve it or slowly look into it, mainly because of the grants. And if they were to solve something really quickly, then all that money that they get funded would be gone. And so, you survey some people, you get a grant for $3 million, for 2 years, and that game goes on for decades. And so when I got into the research in '97, all they really knew or said they knew, they only knew about 5 things: that people felt that they were out of their body, they had a feeling of loved ones, there was a godlike figure, they got a life review, and stuff, things like that. But there's so much more to it. This is from the book, and it sums up how I feel about that and why I called it a riddle to be solved. Because the near-death has an order, it has several sequential stages, a clear and orderly structure, repeating patterns, a beginning, middle, and end, which makes sense when seen as a whole, single event, instead of some randomly occurring, meaningless, misunderstood fragment of some murky afterlife memory. And so it is, when you see it as a whole thing, it has a lot of sequential stages, things that are in order, like, and we'll get into it. As I explain my near-death, I'll explain what the stages are, not only in the death process itself when a person dies, but when they have the full near-death. I had a full near-death, Natalie, was able to remember about 96% of it, with the writing of it helping to jar even a little bit more loose. So also, I had a lot of a history of out of bodies before the near death. I had the near death at 14, and I had been having out of body since age 6. So by age 13 or 14, I was an expert at them and could control them. So, and the near death is a spiritual out of body. Whereas an atheist can have a regular out of body and be kind of limited to the earth plane, roaming around at night and stuff in this world. The spiritual out of body can take you to other dimensions. The regular out of body too, but the spiritual body involves the presence of God and the person's journeying to get to that God, to return to God. So I didn't see it as a riddle. I just saw it as a paranormal experience that was dimly remembered. And the world authorities were looking for a childhood experiencer, an experiencer who was psychic as a child, thinking that the out of bodies. And by age 13, I had about at least 11 or 12,000. And I would have like as many as 6 different kind of separate dreaming out of body experiences a night. Lucid dreams, regular dreams, out of bodies, nightmares, all of that. So I get used to them. And each one had different degrees of consciousness, like how awake you were during the dream or the out of body. So they started at 6. By age 13, I was used to them and knew when I was having one. And so the near death is a spiritual out of body. So I was used to a lot of those things. So for me, I was able to remember a lot. And then I thought about it after the doctor asked. No one had really asked. And back then I had not really mentioned it to anyone. Because in the mid 80s to mid 90s, they were still checking it out. Phil Donahue, Oprah, and them were kind of seeing what it was. People were seeing Elvis. No one had an exact clue on what it was. I remembered what mine was and held it to myself until I heard about the scientist, Dr. Grayson. He's at the University of Virginia. He seemed to really believe in it. So I contacted him. He asked me to be involved in his research and personality study. The research went really well. It literally went over his head. I had to go to the second world authority then, but she is now the first world authority, PMH Atwater. We still keep in contact. She died 3 times, and she understood more what I went through, and it was easy for me to understand her. So after 3 years with Grayson, I moved to PMH Atwater, and did research with her. And at the same time, Natalie, I was working with Dr. Jacobs, because I saw some things in my own near death that I wanted a UFO, a good one, researcher to check out, just to see what he thought. I knew what I thought, but I wanted to see if he saw anything, and if he did, what he saw in my near death. So I worked at Temple University with the Temple University Police. He happened to, by the grace of God, work there too. In fact, his building was right next door to our headquarters. I had a position where I could just float anywhere, and I worked at the hospital and main campus. I had a position where I could float anywhere I wanted around the university. Just, walk in any building, stop any student or trespasser. So in between lunch reliefs and all that, I would go talk to him. Then we would talk after work for hours. So I ended up studying with him one-on-one for 12 years straight. So that was deep too. But so I was working with both the near-death world authorities and the Dr. Jacobs. He was a UFO world authority, and he had a suspicious negative view of them, just like I do. And I went to him on the UFO thing, and I wanted to see if he saw anything in my near death. Because these scientists, they only usually, they're better now, but they only know about their specific fields. Like Dr. Tart, he's the level of consciousness and out of body world authority. Grayson and Atwater are the near death out authorities. Jacobs and the others, UFO. And so they weren't the UFO guy wasn't used to dreams. The near-death guy wasn't used to UFOs or out of bodies, and the dreaming. So it's like that, and they were all in their little boxes, and they couldn't see the bigger picture of the whole paranormal field and how God's rooms have many mansions. How a dream can turn into a lucid dream. Lucid dream can turn into an out of body. Out of body can really change you. Once you have an out of body, just absorbing the cosmic residue from the out of body will change the person. It'll enhance them greatly. And that will begin the blossoming of the psychic powers. And the same thing for dreams. But to me, I didn't see it as any riddle. I just saw it as that some people had these things happen and some didn't. And it turned out the ones who didn't were usually all the doctors, except for PMH Atwater. She came in and really not saved, but elevated the near-death field in the early 80s to what it is now. Without her, they weren't going anywhere. Science lags woefully behind true spirituality. And so it was good working with them, and I learned a lot, but it went beyond their understanding too, because I saw the bigger picture. And to everything, there's a subset, just like the subset of an out-of-body experience is that the person is literally dreaming in bed. That's the secondary, deeper reality. And he's having an out-of-body, but he will return. And the near-death and the UFO abduction both have subsets, the deeper reality than just what is presently seen.
It's also fascinating. And that's what really stuck out with me with that book title, because these experiences are also similar, but differ so vastly. And it's kind of hard to find an underlining medium between it all. And I think that science, spirituality have a place together. But unfortunately, these experiences, or maybe fortunately, these experiences are not black and white because they're molded to the individual. And then that as a whole, what does that mean for us as people and how we see our consciousness and the afterlife and our spiritual body? And just knowing that, you're right, does alter your mindset. It opens your mind up to the capacity to even think that the possibility truly that we never die and that there is consciousness lives on forever. And what does that mean for us? What do we do with that now as a whole, not just for experiences like you, but for people who've never experienced like me? So that's one thing that really stuck out to me about your book title. And I'm so excited to receive it in the mail. I can't wait to read it. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, and it was so interesting, all that you had to say, and it really got my wheels turning already. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, you talked about your out-of-body experiences growing up as a kid. So you were pretty awakened, I would say, as a child to begin with. But in your home, was death or afterlife or spirituality, religion, something that was spoken about freely in your home growing up? And what was that like?
Well, because of the Barney and Betty Hill connection, my parents were friends with them before they saw the UFO. Because of that, they were okay with UFOs because their friends had seen one and they believed them, and we believed them too. We went to church normally as normal people in the 60s. We went to church. In the 60s was kind of like half radical and then half straight. Again, these straight families, and then you had like the young people, like in college age, were rebelling against the society that they thought was bad. 60s was pretty wild all around. There were a lot of riots and stuff. But the young people started to change things. And the esoteric and stuff became more public and mainstream, like the Silver Surfer. They had posters. That was a famous poster in the 60s. Yeah, it was just a thing that they were open to, because we asked them about. They believed in the invisible realms, but they didn't get deep into it. But we did as kids, especially me, because I knew that there are things happening that we couldn't see, but that there was a world there. While awake or when dreaming, there was another full, real world that we went to, and that was just as real as this world, except we had a different level of consciousness, our awareness was different, and of it. And so But we weren't allowed to talk about these things really. Like if I told my parents that I came out of my body, and any kid back then, black or white, if they said, "Look, I came out of my body last night. I was floating above my bed," they wouldn't say nothing. They would take you to a doctor, and you'd probably go to a psychiatrist. And they had crazy houses back then. They used to take people back that, to crazy. If they said they saw a UFO or that aliens were after them, they would quickly take you. And so we weren't allowed to talk about it to about the 80s. And movies like Flatliners and talk shows about near death helped a lot. Um, yeah, they were open to it, but I always kept those things to myself. I knew that they were real, floating above the bed and being fully awake, and then looking down and seeing my body there too. But being my consciousness was located in the astral. And so I had all those things and got used to them, but I never told them. And I had sleep disorders that they didn't really recognize. You know, um, the nighttime things would keep me up until 4, trying not to go to sleep because I would have the falling dream again. So, and that lasted all the way up until high school. And then I was a teenager too, and that was a little too heavy for a teenager's mind then. But in my 20s, I began to acknowledge like what was happening and who I was, and I began to practice and experiment with the abilities and develop them. By the time I was in my late 30s, I could fully do it. I could fully do anything psychically. And then I found the world authorities, the scientists I worked with. And I had other friends who I asked to write to these scientists. Scientists said, write to us if you have any experiences. No one did. I did, and I forgot about it. And then a month later, I was contacted. But so the parents were cool with it, but we never told them about it because too much of that talk, and you could, they would think that you were crazy. And even the person initially thinks that something's wrong with them when they feel themselves sinking through the mattress, or let's see, any of those things, deja vu, paralyzation when you're half awake, half asleep. That's an interesting thing that runs through all those, through a few of those important paranormal things. But the parents, yeah, they were okay with it. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. Okay, so your actual near-death experience happened when you were a teenager, and you had drowned. So let's start on that day. What were the circumstances that led up to your NDE?
Okay, yeah. So I used to live in Ohio. We moved from Philly to Kent, Ohio, Kent State, where the students got shot. This was in 1970. So I was a good swimmer, started playing sports. So I did water polo and competitive swimming. And so we were at a lake one day. It was a youth group picnic with our church friends. And we had like high school friends who were there too. So it was cool because it was almost like a party. And so we were at this lake, and I jump up, come down feet first, like a gymnast or a diver, and get stuck in the muck. Because I was going to push up off the bottom of the lake like a swimmer. And I got stuck, and I got stuck up to the knee. I went way down. And it was just like tar. I could not lift. I used to lift weights. I could not lift my knee out. And I held my breath until I could do it no more. And then I sucked in. It was vacuumed in. It felt like 2 or 3 trash cans full of water, really quick. And I was stretched out like that, like you see in the movies. And that's when I got still like that and was full of water, I was still awake, but that was when the paralysis, or what we might call primer rigor mortis, would begin to set in. And I fell on my side with my knee still stuck in. And when I fell on the bottom, Natalie, the soot from the muck came up and covered me like a cold, dark death blanket. I started fully shivering, really cold. I couldn't stop shivering. my organs begin to go out like candles, really softly. I was freezing cold, organs were going out, and I knew which organ was going out as it went out. I automatically knew it. That plus the speed of that event was starting to slow down into a dream time. And when you get that automatic knowing, and then the distortion of time, that shows that a change is about to take occur, especially conscious-wise. So I fell down, organs shut down one by one, the kidney, the liver, the spleen, the lungs. At that time, the paralysis had creeped up from the feet all the way up to the neck. I could only look straight ahead and see from the peripheral. I couldn't turn or anything, and I could hear. And the heart was the last thing to go. And when it got to its last beat, and it got slower degree by degree. Maybe it went from beating to beating about once every 6 seconds, then once every 12 seconds, then 18 seconds. Then it stopped. And when it stopped, there was a loud boom, and everything went black. I was able to slowly watch myself slowly die with the paralyzations, the eyes open, not being able to move. And when a person has an out of body, they are slowly paralyzed. And if you do breathing exercises, we'll get into it, you can stay more awake and feel yourself becoming paralyzed while you're in bed asleep, or while you're watching a movie, you're half awake and half asleep. The paralysis slowly creeps up, usually always from the legs, and then up to the chest. And that occurs because that's that's always a signal that you're about to have an out-of-body experience. And during sleep, if you can stay awake through the breathing exercises, you can literally feel and watch yourself come out of your physical and look down at it. And then the body stands itself up around the bed, usually on the side or at the end of the bed. It literally stands itself up. There's a magnetic pull that tries to pull you back into the body because the body must survive. So it can pull you back in. So all you have to do is lean the other way, and you can slowly stretch away from the body. Once you get about 5 or 6 feet, then you're free to walk around in the real world, but invisible. And that's what the astral or the out of body is. The astral projection is when you do it so many times that you become an expert at it. Then they call it astral because you can project at will. But the out of body, there are 3 types of out of bodies: the spontaneous, the controlled, and then the uncontrolled, where the out of body may be removed without your volition or permission. That gets into the UFO thing with the astral abduction. But so at the moment of death, the paralysis was complete. Before I flatlined, I was in complete pain. Then it suddenly stopped. And I could, even though couldn't breathe, I could relax again. I felt peace. I knew that somehow everything was going to be all right. The freezing cold stopped. The shivering stopped. Any kind of pain I had stopped. I had been stopped breathing, but there was a sudden peace, like a surrender. And I knew everything was going to be all right. And I was accepting that I was going to die. The heart stopped. At the same time, the eyes went out. And then the hearing was the last thing to go. And then there was like a whooshing sound. But what was really happening, my body was paralyzed. I was slowly coming up out of the body. Now, in death, in an out of body, you can see it, but at the moment of death, when you make that transition from physical to spiritual, it's usually a blackout. And the person flatlines, there's a dark void where nothing is seen, heard, felt, or touched, and you're just out. Then suddenly you wake back up. I call that reconsciousness after death. Approximately 15 to 22 seconds, a person will regain reconsciousness after death. You'll wake back up, remembering that you are you. You remember who you are, and as you begin to look around, you see your dead body, and then you remember what had just happened. I got into a car accident, yet I'm still alive. And you're usually floating above your body, about 8 to 10 feet, about the height of the ceiling, maybe a little bit more. Nothing that you would be afraid of the height. But the seeing your dead body, because you always wake up right near your body, and you see what happened, it reminds you, I just died, but I'm still awake. And you're fully happy because you have literally survived death. And with your own personality intact. You're not some tree or Marco Polo. You're your own self. So this happened to me. I flatlined, came out the body, regained consciousness after death. And then I had the realization of time and space. I realized that I existed somewhere in space, and the time was the time of death. And once those two things were realized, the scene disappeared. Although it's the little things that are super important in anything, and especially in these paranormal things. I woke up in like a gyroscope type of sphere, like the Leonardo da Vinci Diluvian Man, that he was in that thing. I woke up in something just like that, and it was spinning as I regained consciousness. And it was fizzy, like the soft drink, the fizz of a soft drink. And it was at first solid and then disintegrated along as my consciousness dawned. It disintegrated in time with the consciousness. It lasted about 5 seconds. But when I saw the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, you remember that? She got into that machine. That was the exact type of thing it was. And so I looked that up in the years afterwards. And what it is said to be is a Merkaba, like a vehicle of transport. So it's those little things like that. So I woke up, the realization of time and space. I realized where I was. And then the scene changed suddenly. And I appeared, let me show you the picture. I appeared here in what they call a life review room. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, this might be even better. I appeared in this thing, this ring, circled ring. It's a life review room. I appeared in the middle of it, floating in midair. And there was 3 screens. The sides of the room went one way, and the inner side went the other way. And that's important too. One way and then the other way. And because that does cause levitation, that reverse spinning. Where one goes this way, the other goes that way, that levitates. I could see in 360-degree vision all around just by thinking about it or wanting to see it. And you see it, everything that you need to see, see it all at once. So 3 screens, everything I said, everything I thought, everything I ever did was shown to me.
So your life review was split 3 different ways on 3 different screens. Is that what you're saying? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, everything I saw, everything I thought inside my mind, even to myself in secret, and everything I ever did to anyone, good or bad.
Oh, wow.
And it was shown not only in a multi-dimensional way, just like when you're shifting a deck of cards. Yeah, the life review. So everything I saw, said, or thought, or did to anyone else. And you saw it like this. And the images were like that, where you saw each one at the same time, all at once. And you felt, like I threw a rock at this kid once. And it didn't hit him, but in the life review, I was him, and I could feel the rock almost hitting my face. So I realized what I had done to him, and I felt it too. And then in real life, he threw one at me, and it did hit. But floating there, and you let it happen, because in that dimension, which is the afterlife, that's like the second heaven. It's the not heaven, not earth, the in-between. It's the realm where we have our dreams out of bodies, or UFO sightings, all of that stuff, or future dreams, remote feelings is there. And in the out of body, if the person can wake up, they're flying around, we can do some deep stuff. And then just being in that realm, even once, even through a powerful dream, it changes the person. And these psychic abilities begin to emerge. But so I'm in this thing, and a voice asked me, what have you done to help yourself? What have you done to help others? And have you always believed in me? And even though he already knew, I said yes to all of them. You know, I've helped myself, I've helped others, been good to them, and I've always believed in you. And as soon as he said that, again, the scene changed. I was out of there. Although at the end of that scene, what have you done to help yourself, others, and do you believe in me? There was a invisible secondary son of God type figure who was exhorting with God to let me in, that I had been good. Exhorting well, like a super lawyer, some have described it, but exhorting in my behalf. And so that was good. Right after the life review, I found myself again, like the contact scene, on a beach. And other near-deathers have found themselves on a beach-like setting. And I saw the sun come up across the sky, right here. The sun came up, and it moved as it went up into the sky. The sun was at first orange. I mean, yeah, well, orange, yes. Just like a real sun. And I watched it as a sun. And then when it moved up in the sky, I moved up into the air with it. And I was like transfixed by it because it was the only thing there. And it moved across the sky, but I didn't see it move. It was suddenly here, suddenly there, and suddenly there, without me taking my attention off of it. I went up in unison with it and was locked onto it. And the rays from this sun sphere went through me. And the orange rays, just like a regular orange or orange juice, were rays of healing and strength and the physical type of properties where you're being healed, you're being cleansed and repaired, whether inward or outward. Then, without seeing it change, it became a red sphere. And I saw this sphere as God, and I looked right at it. It was about 50 feet or half a football field away from me. And I looked at it, and I was suspended in the air. And they say you shall meet God in the air. And I was in the air, suspended, and the sphere began to emit these waves, like light waves of super love. And it's that ecstatic love that the monks and the mystics and the priests talk about, that ecstasy. And here's a quote too, that human beings were created by their creator in such a way that ecstasy is the only dependable mode of conduct / control for sentient beings. Ecstasy, a high spiritual level, is also associated with that transformation between life and death. So when you get to that ecstasy level, that's super blissful and it's super ecstatic. In fact, it's orgasmic, heavily orgasmic, to the point where I was watching it. It was suspiciously orgasmic. I was watching as it was shaking me around, but it felt super good. The kind of place where a person would surrender to for the rest of time. Because sometimes you may be dealing with an illusion that's affecting you, but it's not even really there. Like in that world, the illusions themselves are so powerful that they're more real than anything that we have on this earth plane. Not the near death is too. Like you hear people say, the near death is so powerful, more than anything on this earth. And the illusions, not just the near death, but the illusions, what you think that you saw, they're so powerful and they're alive there, but not real. So powerful that they affect you after you wake back up from the near death. So this red love of God, it was also God's forgiveness, like the heart rose opening and blossoming, and the red lotus thing. It was all of that, and just the person is is absorbing God's love, his divine love. And like the kind of love that human beings seek here on earth really can only be found in heaven through God. The kind of love that we really want and we really deserve can only come from God. And that was what he or it was giving me. And so the person, of course, just wants to stay in that state, that that state of grace, that state of ecstasy. So in those experiences, the more emotions, the more you have your mind and your thoughts under fully control, or at least you're observing them, the easier it is to deal. And you begin to pierce, like if you focus on something and it's really there, you'll be able to see the reality of what it is. If it's an illusion, it'll begin to fade away once your focus is concentrated enough. And here's a quote for that. Highly focused concentration during advanced meditation produces a merging into things where one becomes one with one's object of focus, you know? And the higher your focus is, especially with meditation, you begin to absorb into and merge and meld with what you're focusing on, whether it be your boyfriend, your new job, something in, you know, in the inside world. But that's a good quote. And here's an example of that. And you may have heard it on the news. I was sitting in a tree and a squirrel was looking at me. And so I was like, this squirrel's looking at me. So I said, I'm going to look right back at it. And my spirit jumped into the squirrel. I saw myself from his perception, and then I jumped back into myself within a second or a half a second. That happened again when I was in out of body form. I was floating along this football field. Down the street, I saw some cars going the same direction. So I decided to race them while I was flying. And as I got to the end of the football field, something made me stop. And there was something in the bushes ahead of me that was small, that was super afraid, because I could feel the fear immediately. And I swooped into it. It was like a small skunk or rabbit or something, and then swooped into my other body. And in that world, it's thought actuated. So whatever you want to know, see, go, or do, it happens automatically. That's why you have to control your emotions in any of those things: haunted house, near death, out of body, UFO, or sleep and dream things. That'll help you see the reality of what's happening. And the illusionary stuff that's not even there will just fade away. And it'll just be you in the truth of what is happening. And so the red light, and so I'm engulfed in it, it's vibrating me, and I'm seeing that it's a little much, suspiciously much. Then but that was God's full forgiveness, and could be seen and is God's full forgiveness in that form for me. And there's a general ascension upward. And as the sphere changed colors, it ascended too, until I was up to the highest light. After the red lights came the white light, the most powerful light of all of them, and the strongest. And the white light was responsible for the universal knowledge, the immediate knowledge of knowing things, of seeing things, of becoming one with the universe. And then after the white light, you become one with God. But the white light's primary properties are to elevate the person in mind and spirit and intelligence, and then purify the person, where the person must be completely spiritually purified to even come close to God. And as you're going into as I went into the white light, it was also tractor beam pulling me into it. So I went in with it while it was pulling me. And there were various degrees of spirit body separation through each of those sun spheres. In the first one, I was more solid. In the second one, I was semi-solid. In the third one, I began to become completely invisible. Whereas a teeming essence, just like the fizz off a soft drink, sparkling. And then into nothingness, where I was just all thought. But so the white light, and I ascend up into it. And it does look like the soft clouds that you see on an airplane flight. It looks just like that. And you go into them, the first thing you can feel that the universe is alive and that you're alive with it. So I'm going into the white light. The spirit body is disintegrating to its finest. It's until I'm invisible completely. And I feel that I'm part of everything, and I am part of everything. At one point, as I was going upward, I looked down at the lake that I was at, and I could see the trees down there and the birds flying. And while I was ascending upward in spirit body form, I could also feel the physical earth breezes going against my skin as I ascended upward. I did not ascend physically, but my spirit body ascended. But I could still feel the physical sensation as though I were in physical form. So the white light's main property: elevate and purify. And there was again another lapse of consciousness, like I explained before, between each of those settings, like a lapse of consciousness at the moment of death, a lapse of consciousness going into the light reveal, another lapse of consciousness when I appeared on the beach, another lapse of consciousness going into the white lights. And so I go into the white lights, purified and elevated, and a lapse of consciousness. I wake up in this circular room, and I'm on the floor. That's like a funny place to be, like if you wake up in heaven. But so I'm on the floor. I'm still like the level of consciousness would be kind of like a dream consciousness, where the white light's consciousness was infinity consciousness. So I wake up in this round room. I'm sitting there, and as soon as I start to focus, I could see beings moving in the background. And as soon as I focused on them, right in front of me came the one being that we would call God. And once I looked, I knew it was God, and we were both in this circular thing that began to turn like a whirlpool. And a mystic swoon came on to me, where in spirit form I began to coalesce, intermingle with this being like that. Before that swirling thing started, I looked at him, and then the being put me to sleep. And I used my willpower to look up again because I wanted to see. And I knew if I could just look at him for 1 second in that realm, you can obtain the essence identity all at once. You can get a 360-degree knowledge and sighting of what exactly you're concentrating on. So I know if I can just look at this thing, I can see what it is and if it's real. And I looked at it a second time, then it put me fully out. And then I woke up underwater and swam to the top and choked out buckets of the dock water underneath the dock. And then I slowly crawled to the sand of the dock. I was in full shock, and with my leg, I remember just scraping the muck off, even though you don't know what to call it. I knew something big had happened, and I put it back to the back of my mind. It's so there's but that was a near death. I've had a lot of stuff happen. If you want to ask me anything, about anything, you can do that too, Natalie.
No, it's so interesting and fascinating, especially the parts of your experience where you found yourself inside of some sphere or wheel, some type, based on your photo. And it's funny because recently I was on social media and there was a gentleman on there, and I'm so sorry, I don't know his handle. Maybe I'll add it in the video after, maybe a screenshot of it. But he takes what people think, we'll say angels, for instance, what an angel looks like, and he'll post a picture. This is what people think angels look like, and he'll input it into a AI software that will generate the image based on the information. And it was indeed a wheel type thing, and that's what AI said that angels, based on the information, look like. So it was really interesting, and I'll send that to you just to see, if it similar or, I don't know. It was just so interesting. Now I want to ask you about that too, because you said towards the end of your experience, although it wasn't so visceral, it was more dreamlike, you said, was there similarities from that circular room to the room that you were in? And I'm using the word room loosely, the space that you were in that was your life review. Was there any similarities in those two spaces?
Yes, that's a good question. I don't think, let's see, no one's ever asked me that. If the second room was equal to the first or close, it was close. So it was a circular room, and it could have possibly been the same room. There was a suspension in that, but there was some control in the secondary room with the God figure. And I say God figure because that's what we would see it as. The controllers were concerned in the near-death research about a God figure. This is stuff that they never told the regular citizens or even the deans in them. The scientists were concerned about what they called the controller and what we would call God, and what I call the controlling agent in charge, because it represented a God figure or the opposite of a God figure. And you weren't allowed to talk about God or opposite of God on college campuses in 1997. For some reason, I looked into it myself as a beginning mystic. I was not connected formally into any other campuses. And so I could look at that stuff and bring out the results, which I did. And that's in book 2. But that controller is a being who roams the paranormal corridors at will, doing what he will or not. And it's like a benevolent but controlling figure. And I asked people to be with God and you had to be fully controlled by God. Would you like that? Or would you rather be on your own without God? And most people say, I'd rather be controlled by God than on my own without him. And God is like the centerpiece in all of these things. That's what the humans strive for in the near death. That's who allows us to regain consciousness after death. It's that's the peak, the highest height is God, to see the creator, to see our actual parent, where we came from, who made us. And it layers you not just from the psychic after effects from the cosmic residue that give you psychic ability, but it layers you with the inner moral substance, a higher level of thinking, a higher empathy for others, a higher clarity of thought. Those studies and disciplines make the person almost a spiritual soldier or spiritual warrior. Like there's a saying, it's so important to become a person of substance and depth. And the person might ask, well, how do I become a person of substance and depth? And the answer is the person themselves must be higher than the job, position, or title they may hold. But self-development for the benefit of God and others will take you to a high level. And you'll literally be able to do or have anything you want. And you'll be able to do it whenever you want. And you'll do it so much that you'll stop wanting things and you'll just only want God. And then you really, that's a cool feeling, but you don't need anything except maybe water. And fasting also helps with that. But it's a beautiful field to study, explore, and know about.
Yeah, manifestation. I have a lot of questions about that, and we'll definitely get to that a little later. But I have one more question regarding your near-death experience, and then we'll move on for time's sake, and we still have a lot to cover. This being that you were in the round room, you had your life review, and then there was another being with you that you felt like, if I'm correct, was a branch off of God itself, and he was coming to bat for you like a lawyer. In your opinion, is that like was it like a Jesus figure? Was it your higher self? Was it your spirit guide? Who was that to you? And were they, did you recognize them at all?
Yeah, the scientists asked the same question. That's good. You should ask that. They asked who the bigger figure was, the voice, and then they asked who the little figure was. And the little figure was a spiritual mediator. Depending on what the person believes, if they believe in religion, it was an ambassador, uh, a mediator between me and the higher figure that I could not and was not equipped to address. So, and they spoke in my behalf, and also, watched the question. But people might see it as a Muhammad, a Buddha, a Jesus. It was someone qualified to speak in my behalf. When you do see God, you'll mainly listen to him. And it takes so much, and you don't speak physically, but it takes so much. You're in such awe that you mainly listen to him. And there's not a lot said. You just listen and absorb. You're stunned. And I guess there is communication, but it's not, well, at least for me, like the back and forth stuff. Uh, it's just, you just listen.
Did you perceive this figure as having a form at all, or did you just sense that they were there?
Just a big shadow of something standing.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's incredible. And
That's
I mean,
that's a mediator figure. Yes.
mm,
Yeah, it was something
right.
there, exhorting hard too.
Yeah. Fighting for you.
Exhorting, fighting. Yes.
At any point were you especially when you first left your body, you're in this void type space, you're in the afterlife now. Were you ever like, I'm Eugene and I have just died? Did you remember your life before, or was it you were just fully forget Earth, trying to dissect what is happening to you in that time? Did you remember who you were?
Yes. Yeah. I recognized my personality remained intact. I remembered who I was. I was still the same person. During the life review, when I saw scenes from the childhood, I remembered those too. I remember where I lived and who I was. Yes, the personality will remain with you. Like God makes us so unique that there will never be another you, me, or your mom, or anyone like that ever. Even if they were to made a clone of her, it would never be the exact duplicate. They're super unique. And I think that we have this one life here on Earth to live. And I do not think that we're coming back here in a reincarnation type of way. I don't think that God would put us in this kind of life, have us go through it, sometimes harshly, and sometimes very well, and then lose all memory of that life, and only to bring us back here to go through it again and again and again. I don't think you would play that kind of game. Mm. I think we have one life. We can do anything we want with that life. I think we have a God who will help us in that life. And then we go on to a higher, 10 times more better life. We're more fully awake. We're our full 360-degree selves. Even though we can be that here, in that afterlife or the out of body, you become way more of yourself, and you do carry the residue back after the out of body.
So if we go ahead a little bit, now you're back into your body and you find yourself on the shoreline of the lake, trying to clean off all the muck, and then you go back out of consciousness. Am I correct? Did you get help? Did anybody know what happened to you? Did you share right away?
No, I didn't talk about that for 10 years, until I was in my 20s. Then I told a best friend, guy friend, and then I told my mom. But I didn't tell anyone I died for 10 years. I was used to keeping all that stuff inside anyway. And back then, early 80s, late 70s, you still couldn't really say, because they had near-death research. It started in 77, but you still couldn't say to regular people, oh, I died and came back to life, like in a Frankenstein movie. Mm-hmm. But back then, they would really look hard at you. And back, people were partying back then. And back then, they would think, come on, what did you take? A pill, mm-hmm. booze, weed, acid? Why are you talking like that? It's talking about seeing flying saucers and stuff. And that was just not allowed. Even by like regular, you might have some really cool people in your group or something, who you hung with who believed in that stuff. But no one really talked about like having it and stuff. It was still kind of taboo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Even to talk about it was kind of like, you're weird, man. But we turned out to be right. Mm-hmm. The near death had the biggest positive and strongest effects. And the simplest things became super important, like listening to someone and fully looking at them so much that you would know what they were going to say before. Um, it's funny the after effects of these things because the person they become higher and more cemented and more developed in a 360-degree way, but they become lower in the importance that they put on themselves, on life, and on others. Things get really seen as they really are because that struggle for life and death, there's the initial struggle for life and death where the person says, no, I'm not going to die. I'm going to fight and crawl my way out of this. That's the most primal thing a person can do. Even the little beetles and stuff, when we hurt them and spray them with bug spray, they struggle. And that's a terrifying thing when you're struggling, like to stay alive. So you go through a lot with the near death, and the after effects are super strong.
Sorry, you were saying
No,
about the after effects. So it just made me think, aside from your ability to have OBEs, the dream state, manipulating that at your will, as far as after effects go, did you notice any more mediumship or psychic abilities?
yes, yeah. Let's see. Yes, well, I had the near death at 14. I had already had psychic abilities, but the near death fully magnified them. And it was in my 20s, late teens and 20s. Now, I had a UFO sighting at 19 that was pretty strong and kind of messed me up for a little while. But in the 20s, when I was a little bit more cemented, personality was more intact, I began to acknowledge that those things did happen to me. I began to study them even more heavily because I studied them back then to find out what was happening to me. And back then, psychology books were the main places that we could find that information. But you could find a good bookstore that had some occult or philosophy, and we could study it through that way. Yes, yeah, it fully blossomed. Where like I'd be walking down the street, I'd hear someone call my name, I'd turn around and no one would be there. Um, I began to know what people were thinking inside their minds. Sometimes I could hear them thinking. I could begin to put my thoughts into their heads. Um, I began to know what was going to happen in the future. And just like today, I was getting ready to take a shower like 2 hours before we were to meet. And I was in the bathroom taking off my robe, and something said, the front door is unlocked. And I knew it wasn't. Although something told me, check it anyway. And I went and it was unlocked. So it's good to, those kind of things that can be life-saving. You're hearing voices. One time I was running down a hill in Tennessee. I was going to school there, college. I was going to jump over the entire sidewalk, which I could. There's only a one-lane street anyway. So right before, I'm running at full speed. And right before I get ready to jump, something says, stop. And it yells it. And I stop on one foot, and a car of gangsters flashed by me, brushing the clothes. I would have exploded on contact. They were going so fast. And in my teenage concentratedness, I didn't even hear or see the car coming. But I stopped immediately because the voice told me to. And some people might think, is that the subconscious or is that God? It could be either one, but it was a life-saving voice. And I had a lot of those too. And I was young then, around your age, and I wanted the powers, I wanted the abilities to a strong degree. And I did everything I could to find out how to get them and to get them. And when you get them, you know more too. And so the after effects and the psychic abilities, they can become a trap, Natalie, because it becomes fun when you have the psychic abilities and you know what to do and you know answers to the test automatically. It suggests things to people's mind, like you're looking at a girl and say, look, talk to me, or look at me. I said, there's a thing where you can communicate from your mind to someone else's mind. I tried it with my son when he was 2. He was sitting downstairs. I was upstairs in the window. Look at him. He was at the driveway outside. I was just overwatching him. And I said, let me try this experiment. So while he was just playing, while he was watching a bumblebee, I called him inside my mind. I said, Eddie, inside. And then he looked around. And he didn't, but he didn't, no one was in the driveway. And so I did it again. I said, Eddie, inside my mind. And he looked right up and said, Dad. And so I wanted to see if he had it. But I used to look at people on the bus, look at the back of their head and say, sleep. And while I would say that, I would take a deep breathing. And when I blew out, you could see their head go down while I was saying sleep. And things like that. And fun too. Like you could be with someone and then you're thinking inside your mind while the person's talking to you about their date last night or something super trivial, the basketball team that lost. You're looking at them and you're picturing inside your mind McDonald's or Sizzler Steakhouse or wherever you want to do or go, the amusement park. And you're saying, you're picturing, especially if you put a picture in, but you can also use words too. Like you can say, let's go to the restaurant. Let's go get a steak. And then you let it go and let it sink in. And you say that to the person's mind just a couple of times while you're looking right at them. In time, the person will say, hey, you hungry? You want to, and they will literally, you could, and so, but I was always careful with that because you don't really want to go against any person's will or anything, but it's good for protection purposes. And it's good for like if people come up to bother you.
Wow. So if we were to go back just for a moment about, I know we've talked a lot about it, but out of body experiences, because I have had a reoccurring memory. And I used to have experiences when I was a little girl around 6 or 7. And I remember that specifically because I was wearing those like zip up pajamas, those footy all the way zip up. And I remember that distinctively. And I just have this very strong memory from when I was little. And it would be, we would all go down to go to sleep. And I'm going to pick your brain because you're an expert in this. And I never get an opportunity to really get some advice on this and to see if this is what it was. So the family's asleep, we're all sleeping. And then the next moment, I don't remember it being kind of a dream at all. It was so real. I was just laying like a starfish face down on my living room floor and no one was around. It was just me and the light was on in the living room where before everything was dark. The whole family was asleep. And I just found myself laying face down in my feety pajamas. And then I would rise up to about the height of the middle of the room. And my body would just spin and spin and spin. It felt like forever. And I remember even in my little kid brain being like, I wish it was so real. My stomach would hurt like you're on a roller coaster. It just was endless spinning and I could not stop. And then it would just stop and I would fall on my stomach. And then the next thing I remember, I'd wake up and it'd be morning time and I would be in the room, not in the living room. Or it would be that, or it'd be kind of the same lead up where I would by myself in the living room, lights on, everyone else no one's around. And then I would find myself falling from the sky down to, I think it was like my front yard, and then bouncing and going up as far as, your eye, and then you're falling again. And it would just be endless. And I have a twin brother. So this is why it's fresh in my mind because I had asked him, did you have this when you were little? And sure enough, he had not the spinning experience, but he had the jumping, the endless high jumping and falling down. And so to you, was I out of body as a little kid? Is that what or is that astral traveling? I know it was something other than just a dream.
The second one, the jumping, that was a lucid dream where you were almost conscious. And had you realized during that dream that this is a dream, you would have woken up either fully awake in the dream or awake in real life but invisible somewhere else. But that second one, that slow bouncing thing, that's a clue that you are in a lucid dream, a dream world, and that you have the potential, if you wake up in that world, to then wake up in real life That's where the switch over to out of body begins. If you can realize you're dreaming in a lucid dream.
Wow. Yeah. So it had always stuck with me.
And
It's always been so curious.
the first one does sound like an possible out of body.
It was
The
beyond
spinning.
real. I remember I could feel the carpet on my face. It was just so
And you
real. I
said
could
you
feel
felt
the air
yourself float
around
up?
me spinning. About halfway up, and then immediately started slowly, and I could feel the wind. Like I was spinning so fast. And it was like, when your older brother, whatever, grabs you by the arms and spins
Yeah.
you, it was the
Yeah.
same sensation, and it just would not stop. And I was afraid because I had no idea what was happening. So
Were there any other dreams or anything like that activity in this one particular house? Because I
I
mean,
would wake.
it's the third possibility. This could have been some kind of poltergeist thing where you
Mhm.
literally were. But I think a kid might have. The fact that you didn't scream out, did you scream out or anything?
Nope, I was
That
just
shows
saying
it
it
could
to
have.
myself. Yeah, saying it like, please
It seems
stop.
like it
Like,
was
gosh.
either a dream, lucid dream, out of body. And see, like you had the combination of the rising up while being aware of it. Plus, you had the combination of the dreams, the lucid dream, because that's spinning around and stuff. So you had a combination of both out of body features and lucid dream features. Like the jumping was definitely lucid dream, and especially like the slow motion of it. And it's when the person is having those things, because it becomes so real that the person says this must be a dream, but it's so real they think it's real. It's hyper real where you accept it as real. And but now I used to have a repeating dream where I'd do the same thing, a falling dream every night. So after 60 nights, I realized this is the dream. And I woke up out of it and started flying in real life. But I got so excited that I popped awake in my bed. Um, but yours sounds like a combination of both. And remember, one can lead to the other. The lucid dream can lead to an out of body.
And there was been other
And you,
times where my mom would find me in the morning sleeping, but like behind the TV, behind the entertainment center. I had crawled back there and was asleep.
really?
I had no idea how I got back there. So sleepwalking, she would find me on the other side of the couch from my bed, no idea how I got there. And I would just be asleep,
Oh.
like as happy as can be, which is kind of scary to think about. Like,
And you don't remember going back there?
mm-mm.
That's interesting. And girls are more attuned. I had a girlfriend who was telling me about angels, and it wasn't until after we broke up that I realized that she was right about what she was saying. So, but I always listened to females when they talk to me about their dreams or inner feelings, because a lot of times they were right. And I saw that girls had pretty good vision compared to guys, like physical and like the higher vision. That's interesting. That's an interesting thing, that one.
I know. I knew you would think it would be interesting. That's why I put a little note that I had to share it with you because it was just so cool. There's something I forgot to mention. Around the time where I found myself in my living room floor when I was 6 or 7 and spinning, around that same time in my life, I would hear somebody on the left side of my ear, on the outside of my head, not the inside, on the outside, say my name. And I was always alone in the same living room, always alone. And they would say my name, and I remember thinking like, I'm not afraid of this, but that was weird. Like, who is that? And then it was from that point, really, I thought more about who I was, even as a little kid at that time. It really did open up something in me to think, okay, there's me. I'm Natalie. This is my 7-year-old mind. I'm Natalie, but also there's something behind my mind that is where love comes from. And I always knew that. And even as a little kid that young, I never understood the panic that adults felt, or I felt from adults, about money, the stresses about jobs or relationships, or just the drama of life. I never understood why it was so impacting them so negatively. Because in my mind, I'm like, it's easy. Like, this life is kind of a video game. And it's like, even at that young age. So that experience of spinning, hearing my name called, really catapulted me into thinking, it's funny how that works out. And that's why I'm here today doing this. But
that's
yeah.
Well, I mean, it usually shows up when you're young, and that's good for you to have out of bodies in your 30s. That shows there's still a lot of potential there. to continue
And you're the guy
on.
to talk to. So let's, you know what? Let's piggyback off of that. So if there's somebody out there like me who doesn't have a lot of experiences with out of body or astral travel, but wants to get into it and start practicing, what are like the first 3 steps that they should do?
For the out of body, let's see. The first 3 steps, control like the sleeping space. Like make sure that you have a place where no one will run in the door and wake you up suddenly if you can. Begin to do deep breathing exercises when you go to sleep, and that will fully open the psychic doors. It'll get you from dreams into out of bodies. In fact, the person can dream their way from a dream into an out of body, especially like if you go to sleep, picturing yourself flying, you're doing the breathing exercises. The scene of flying will begin to slowly coalesce and come together as you think that you'll really be doing the breathing. But as you're doing the breathing, you'll think that you're imagining yourself flying, but you'll literally start to appear in the dream. And it's the breathings that can help you. It's the breathings that extend the continuity of consciousness, where you can go from dream state to the out of body state without going to sleep. Those deep breathings, even at the lowest level of consciousness, will keep you awake just enough where you can literally watch yourself have the out of body. And the body, especially when you feel yourself become paralyzed, and the breathings, that's the first thing. There's deep breathings when you go to sleep. And 18 is a good amount. They say that if you do 18, that's when things start to occur. But usually the person like 1 to 5 to 10, and usually they're out. But if you do a steady habit of doing every week, every day, every night, every month, year after year, some amazing things will be happening in every aspect of your life, from your health from your physical world and in your spiritual world. Your spiritual world will really wake up when you do the breathings. And you'll be doing the breathings one night, and you'll see yourself somewhere, because the breathings extend how awake you are as you drift off. It's the breathings that keep you awake. But the breathings is the first thing, and they'll oxygenize your body, where you'll be more awake as you go into a deeper sleep. And it'll be just the subtlest of things, like only your mind and the in and out breathings will be awake, but you'll be able to see it. And so the breathings is the number one thing. Visualizing, like you can have an out of body. I used to have an out of body where I would picture myself climbing up a ladder. And when I reached the top, I said, that's when I'll be awake in my dreams. And I would do the breathings while I was going up the ladder. And I would get to a certain point where it would start to get high. I would look down and it would be super high. And I thought that I was imagining that with the breathings while breathing, but I was actually partially in the dream. And occasionally something would wake me up where I saw that, damn, I was half asleep. I wasn't imagining. But that going up a ladder thing is a good way to have an out of body too. Here's a good book, a book called Lucid Dreaming by Stephen LaBarge. That'd be a good one to get. And here's another one to study. And this other one is really helpful. He's the only guy who I saw knew as much as me, except he did it in the 1920s. And his name was Sylvan Muldoon. He was a Scottish American who became an expert at out of bodies. And I studied his stuff, and he knew exactly what he was talking about, except he came way before everyone else. And his book is called The Adventures in the Out of Body. But if you look up his name, his book will appear. And that's a good one to get. And it might be online for free. But he is a good one. In my chapter 3 of the books, there's a lot of info on how to have them. And you'll be in a better position to have the out of body, especially if you have the crystals near you or right under your pillow. And then you're doing the breathings too, and you're focusing on climbing up that ladder. I used to have a dream where I was flying across a high field of grass to a building that had a big $5 bill on it. And I would recognize that I was in a dream because I would see the big $5 bill as I was dreaming. And if you visualize it vividly enough, you'll think that you're imagining it, but you'll really be flying there in a dream. And the breathings will help you cross over into the dream. And that's So the visualizations is really important to visualize where you want to go and use the breathings as steps to get there.
So so you're saying a deep breathing, 18 around that number of deep breaths is like a starting point. Would you say a space that's comfortable to you, or?
Yes, like for me, because I don't want to get too high up in the sky. So for me, climbing up like a trapeze ladder was a little shaky, but you can also do it in an elevator. And when the door opens on the 30th floor at the top of the building and it opens, you're in the dream world. And you can use that to get, it literally kind of visually pulls you out of your body.
And then you want to have, a marker that will let you know you were in the dream. So for you, it was the $5 bill on the side of the building. For somebody, it could be a black cat. It could be, so just pick something that is familiar to you, and then that would be the pinpoint to tell you, okay, now I can manipulate this and not be afraid.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. And like you said, if you have like a dream marker or clue, and like you say to yourself, I'm going to meet myself. I'm going to have a dream where I wake up in the dream in front of my favorite movie theater, or in front of something that's super familiar to you, or where my son plays baseball, or my son's school, or my job. And it's the repetition of it and the visualization, along with the breathings and then other aids like the crystals and fasting will super help too. Like, have you ever done like a fast where you don't eat for 24 hours on purpose? That's super good. It's for girls and guys. For girls and guys, the hair is super shiny, especially if you do it when you're young. The eyes are super clear. Everything works good. That's why they tell people don't eat before surgery, because they know your body is way more dynamized if you don't eat. And when you do a fast, and all you have to do is eat a good meal one night, go to bed. When you wake up, the fast will be half done. All you have to do is go from the time you wake up till dinner time, and some amazing things will happen. Throughout that day, you'll look at yourself, like your skin will glisten, especially if you do some light exercising. You know, walking up a hill, walking to the park, maybe riding a bike, something super gentle or soft. But you can lay down and read while doing a fast. But the effects will be so beneficial, and the physical effects alone, that you'll do them for the rest of your life. And so the fasting, and once the person does the breathings, it will naturally incline them, because you're really cleaning your mind. They'll naturally be inclined to then clean their body. And when that physical body is fully clean and their thoughts are on a higher path, a lot of good things open up too. And it'll start during the sleep and dream processes, and then comes the out of bodies.
It's interesting because how you're speaking about this, it reminds me of when I had a past life regression done by Simon Bound, who's the host of the Past Lives podcast. I had a session with him, and he walked me into and hypnotized me using that same method, but for him, it was descending stairs, and it was with every step, and the door was the marker that when you turn the door, then you were within your hypnotized state and can remember past lives. So it's interesting that you use the same modality basically to help get you into that plane of consciousness, which is really, really interesting. And it's funny how there's little bits of everything that kind of tie in together the whole spiritual experience. It really does all tie together.
It's really cool, the out of body experience.
Yeah.
And you'll get to see that there is life after death. You'll get to see that there's a whole world that's there to explore. That's incredible what the mind can do and can learn and know and experience. The person gets to a level where they stop wanting things. Like it may be 10 years of getting everything you want. But there's so many more higher levels to go. Like we were talking about the knowledge of the afterlife, or coming out of your bodies, or mixing and merging with God. There's so many things. And the person, after each little thing, an out of body here, a dream here, a falling dream here, and you'll see yourself develop. And it can come fast. It gets to a point where the person doesn't need anything. They kind of only just want to be with God, or maybe just help people. But they can easily get what you want. It's so worth it. But by the time you get to that level, of getting anything, and you get them for a while, you don't want it anymore. Because
Mhm.
the higher you go, this world becomes super meaningless, and the smaller things like sitting on the grass or having a barbecue out back, those smaller things that you think about when you're clawing for life, like when you're dying, all those little things, riding a Ferris wheel, riding the merry-go-round with your kid, doing those little things, baking a pie with your mom, becomes super important. And the person would give a lot if he could just have a chance to like get back there again.
Any of those experiences, you're left with the knowledge that it's the moment that matters, and you do not need to have a near-death experience. You do not need to die to come
No,
to that realization. And
no.
that in itself is interesting, because sometimes I, struggle with the thought, well, why is it important to even think about these things? Sometimes I wish I didn't, and I could just be like the average Joe, just
Yeah, yeah,
and just clocked into the matrix and going to my 9 to 5, and sometimes it'd be easier to be that way. But in the end,
yeah,
I feel blessed that I have this knowledge and the awareness, at least, to, because it reminds me that it really is about the small moments, and just based on
yeah,
what you're telling me, it just confirms using these modalities and utilizing our ability to come out of our body, or just get to know our spiritual self, get to know the spiritual bodies of those around us, energetically interacting,
yeah,
is there as a tool to remind us that this life is a blessing, and we're here just to have those little physical moments of joy on earth.
yes, yes.
And yeah, just hearing you say all that, it just made me think of that, and it just yeah, it's awesome.
And Natalie, just like you were saying about getting in contact with our higher selves and stuff, and when the person like uh, uh, the dream work is really the person, uh, and the meditation is really the person beginning to communicate with their higher self, their subconscious mind. And just like in the Bible, it says, if the two of you shall ask for anything in this world, it will be given to me, you by the Father who's in heaven. That's super true. I've tried it, and it easily works. And so, just like we have our awake mind, but our dreaming mind or our astral mind is the conscious mind of our spirit body. And when we talk to the conscious mind of our higher self with our awake mind, then some powerful things begin to happen. That's when you can start to have anything you want.
And there really is
Uh,
a disconnect with people nowadays. I think it's getting better. It's getting better, definitely, through shows like this, and this is the work that you do, and just the stuff that's out there about these spiritual experiences, the importance of understanding our higher selves. And I think our real wants and desires come from that person. And sometimes I like to believe that my higher self is separate from me, as another entity that I can lean on. And when I was little
yes,
and I had said that I heard my name being called, it wasn't until I've heard myself on recordings before, but doing this podcast and going back and editing, it's almost like it was my voice as a grown up.
okay,
But I heard that
okay.
when I was little. So it was like a little bit of a connection there that I put together. But I just have a couple more questions before we wrap up here. We've been talking for almost 3 hours, or 2.5 hours. And I
I'm,
have so many more questions that I didn't even touch on. So I just got a couple more, and then we'll cut you loose. But
okay.
based on your understanding of UFOs and your experience with aliens, which we didn't get into much this conversation, but I would love to have you back and to pick your brain about those experiences. That'd be amazing. But based on that, based on your knowledge of out of body experience, and all the research that you've done from your near death experience, do you fear death at all? Is there any doubt, or do you have any fear at all when it comes to your mortality and the afterlife?
No, the out of body, even if the person just gets partially out of their body in bed, it shows you that uh, there's a higher side to you that will live on, and it'll live
Mhm.
on in the invisible world. No, I'm
Mhm.
definitely not afraid to die.
How helpful has it been for your life to share your experience with the world?
I like it that because I like the fact that it helps people remember things that happen to them or helps them explain things that happen to them that they weren't sure of, or they didn't know what was happening. I like that. I like that it helps to clarify for me, because a lot of times you don't have anyone to talk to with these things. So when you have something happen to you and then you message, explain it to someone else, it helps you to clarify it. It just sharpens your memory of what happened. Their questions can make you think of things you hadn't thought of before. And I like to see them when they have learned something new or something valuable that could help them or that they wanted to learn. But yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway from your near-death experience for you personally?
Okay, yeah. For me, that there is a God, there is a real, actual God, someone who will protect and that we can know and mix back in with, and that there is life after death. Those two things. I was just so glad to be alive after I regained consciousness after death. Even though I was dead, I was still glad because I knew, I think, therefore I am. I saw myself. And so those two things, there's life after death and that there is a God. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there was the judgment where he asked, with him, if you just believe that he is God, all the other stuff can be can be arranged or erased.
Mm-hmm.
And that's his only concern. And if you do believe, and he knows, you're automatically in. There's no papers to sign. Right then you're in, and that's how it should be. But yeah, those are the two things, like takeaways.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So besides your research, is there any other projects or anything that you're working on that you want the listeners to know about?
I'm working on my second book, which involves the aliens and the alien abductions. And and now I knew Betty Hill, and so we were family friends. So in 1999, she was 80. I said, let me call Mrs. Hill. I was doing films. I do films on the side. I've made about 8 independent films, and mainly in Philly. I'm going to do a little out here. But I said, let me call Mrs. Hill and see if she'll do a documentary with me. I was working with Dr. Jacobs at the time, and she did say yes, and I made a nice 3-hour documentary where I interviewed her as the mystic. And I asked her every question under the book, and only one question stumped her. It was about what we were talking about. If people mistake aliens for angels, and she had never considered that because they have super similar characteristics. But I gently interrogated the 80-year-old living legend in the film. I've withheld it for 20 years. It's the last one she made, and she said it was her longest one. An exhaustive 3-hour film. And her and Dr. Jacobs, the UFO World Authority, had been having a public feud about whether people could go through solid objects and nothing happened to them or the objects. And Betty Hill, Betty Hill said, anytime you see a person going through a brick wall and nothing happens to that wall or that person, you better go see a psychiatrist. And I kind of laughed at her common sense approach. You see someone coming through a wall, you might want to check yourself out. But also, Dr. J's clients said that they were pulled through windshields, through cars, through doors, through houses, up into a waiting UFO. And I know from out of bodies that yes, the person can go through solid things. And so I went down there with that in mind to see who was right, him or her. And it turned out that they were both right. People are physically abducted, and people are brought through solid objects, whether in their physical bodies or astrally abduction. Their astral abduction can be done with the astral bodies and leave the physical bodies there while they mess and fool with the astral bodies. That's where all the energy is anyway. But so that's about it. Yeah, the Betty Hill film, which will soon be out, and we really get into it, just like we did.
Wait, so that's going to be released?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it out with the famous Betty Hill. And yeah, I asked her every question I could think of. And it's good. It would be good to see. It's going to be, whew. Now, the Obamas have a Betty Hill thing coming out too. And President Clinton and Bush saw my research and promoted it, Obama turned the other way and fully ignored me and the research. So did his wife.
Mm.
And I haven't thought well of him since.
Mm. Yeah, I look forward to that. And maybe when that comes out, you can come back on and we can talk about it and dive into that, because we didn't even touch on your abduction experience. And I wanted to, but we were out of time. But definitely, I want to have you back to talk about that. So
yes, and you know what, Natalie? The Betty Hill film will be good too. And with the alien abduction thing and the near death, there is something happening with the aliens and the afterlife. And so that's too. I haven't really told anyone. You might be the second one. I don't know if you're going to put this there. Why do you study the near death and the UFO? To them, it's the exact opposite. And one does give primal ecstasy, the other primal fear. But I saw some interesting connections that I sewed up fully, and that's what the second book's going to be about. So, yeah, that's
we have to do
there
that,
is.
because I'm looking at my questions right now, and I at least have 5 on that exact topic: the connection
There's a,
between the afterlife, the spiritual realm, and extraterrestrials. Because that's not the first time that I've heard some people being slightly confused about angels maybe being perceived as aliens or vice versa. So it'd be interesting to hear what you have to say on that. So we'll definitely have to set that up. But if any of the listeners want to contact you, find out more about your book, or have any questions for you, what are the best ways so that they can contact you?
in America, the best place to go is to my website, where you can order the book from me. I'll mail it right out to you, autograph it, and definitely keep in contact with anyone who buys a book directly from me. That'd be the best place. You can get it online too. But this book, it's going to be super historical in time. And the second one, the book is even better. But the first one, just like I said, I held the pen. God literally wrote it, because it talks about time and space. Can I read? Can I read you a couple of quotes?
Absolutely.
In fact, when we were talking about dreams, that's what reminded me. Like, here's a quote about the dream. Dream vision is the primary method by which human beings experience communication with the Creator, and that's true. A lot can be accomplished by dreams, and they're the huge big door that you can unlock. And once you get into the dreams, it'll lead you right to out of bodies, the daytime experiences, UFOs, near death, all of that. And the psychic abilities will just increase and increase until the person becomes a master or a lady mistress or whatever they call a lady master. But the person will become a master of that, and people will be able to see it. And people will ask you things. It's like on the high level of a priest or a nun or a Saint Teresa or something like that. It's a high thing to study. And so here are the quotes. When we cease to strive to understand, then we will know without understanding. Sometimes people strain too hard to know something when the knowledge is already automatically in there. All you have to do is let it come out or pull it out. So when we cease to strive to understand, then, and that's the mystic's way, to have automatic intuition or knowledge from God or something outside of yourself. That's what true mysticism is, and the devotional aspect, but immediate knowledge or intuition from on high. And that's that and God is the primary tenet of mysticism. The near death is a nonverbal, thought-actuated, symbolic, invisible realm. And that's basically what it is. A nonverbal, thought-actuated, symbolic, where things come in pictures and you interface with them. You don't really talk back. You just interface with them and absorb them, like an osmosis thing. But I guess, let's see. The type of love humans seek on earth can only be found in heaven. And that's some of but there's a lot more quotes in the book, and then there's some that I already given, but it's a wonderful field to study. It's okay.
So guys, I really encourage all the listeners to check out Eugene's book, The American Mystic Solves the Near-Death Riddle. I look forward to reading it. And just based on our conversation today, I know it's going to be packed full of interesting topics and even some tools that we can use to help get us to that point where we can come out of body, have an OBE when we want to. And we learn about higher planes of consciousness in that book, and manifestation. And I think you dive a little bit into your UFO experience in that book as well. Is that correct? A little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I encourage everyone to at least go check it out, and it's going to be in the description below. And Eugene, this has been real fun. I did not expect to be talking to you for almost 3 hours. I could go another 3. It has been like talking to an old friend. It's been really, really great. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for coming on, and please come back. You always have a spot on the show.
Thanks, Natalie. I will. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, guys, we made it through. It was a long episode, but well worth it. Thank you so much to my guest, Eugene. And if you want to check out his book, America's Mystic Solves Near-Death Riddle, I encourage you to do so. You can find it on Amazon. I have it linked down below in the description, along with other ways to contact him if you would like. If you want to support the channel, you know all the ways. You don't need me to tell you. If you have had an experience like I did, finding yourself in the middle of a living room spinning on your stomach, or if you have had an experience like Eugene where you found yourself in a life review room, I would love to hear it. You can email me at downfromabovepod@gmail.com. All right, guys, that's it from me. Have a wonderful week and weekend, and we will see you in the next episode.